Hello, everybody, and welcome to Narrative and a very special edition. We're doing what we've done now a couple of times in showing you the first series that we did on Secret Life of Jeffrey Epstein 6 years ago. Well, this is now episode 3 that we're running tonight, and it's good to be with you. Feel free to keep updating me with any questions. And then after the show, I will also answer as many of these questions as possible. This was a series that we did in 2019. So we look a lot younger, and we certainly did the show as one of the first things we did on this podcast. Now it's many years later, and we're more seasoned and more realistic about what the story really is about and the impact it's going to have on the world. This week alone, we've watched this cover-up, the machinery of a cover-up operating in plain sight. We've had Donald Trump telling reporters that Jeffrey Epstein stole Virginia Giuffre from him. He was referring, of course, to the 16-year-old Mar-a-Lago employee that became the subject of one of these major lawsuits, criminal suits involving Ghislaine Maxwell. And we've had comments from the Jeffrey family in Australia who've said that they really are opposed to any leniency to Maxwell because she is, they say, a monster, an absolute monster, and was crueler, in fact, than Jeffrey Epstein to their sister who died of a suicide last April. But the biggest thing that's happened in the last few hours, which I'm kind of stunned at, and I'm sure you're all quite stunned at, is the move by Ghislaine Maxwell to a minimal security prison camp, not even a prison, just security camp in Texas. Some people call these things Club Fed. And this is the apparent outcome of a deal that has been struck by the administration, by Donald Trump, and by the Department of Justice with Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers. Because why else would she be moving if she hasn't got some sort of deal? And that deal is pretty dramatic because if true, this is obviously a deal that's been struck between Trump or Todd Blanche, which is Trump's former personal attorney, who's now the deputy attorney general, who met with Ghislaine Maxwell for 9 hours over 2 days, asking her about 100 names. Who's on the list of 100 names? You can only guess there'll be anything but Donald Trump. And instead, we're going to get a manufactured narrative, it seems, with Ghislaine Maxwell revealing what her and Todd Blanche and Donald Trump want to be revealed. And we can see that by the fact that she's getting this move to this cushy new prison camp. If it was just her going, she wouldn't be moving to a cushy camp if she was going to be revealing the truth. She's going to the cushy camp because she's going to be lying on behalf of the president of the United States. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. So this is why this series is so interesting. Instead of focusing on the girls when we did the series, instead of focusing on that part of the Epstein case, which is of course sensational and everyone really is interested in that, let's try follow the money. Let's see where the money goes. And boy, do we find a lot. This was 2019. You probably haven't even heard of a lot of this stuff because this was a show that premiered at #1 and was quickly suppressed by every single social media outlet out there. It certainly got a very serious response from people, I will just call it the intelligence world, who targeted me and my credibility and all sorts of other things for years afterwards. So one of those echoes is, of course, Virginia Giuffre. And the reason why it's so interesting that she's back in the news and the timing of all of this is because this particular episode also talks about the Maison Les Amitiés, which is the house that Epstein and Donald Trump feuded over in Palm Beach. It was a big feud and apparently caused the end of their friendship, although they did stay friends for many years after. But we noticed Donald Trump this week talking about Giuffre being stolen by Epstein from his operation in Mar-a-Lago. And that is because I believe he was trying to deflect attention away from the Maison Les Amitiés, which was in fact a Russian laundering exercise, a Russian money laundering exercise. Trump bought that place for $40 million. He then sold it 4 years later to Dmitry Rabobliov for $96 million. So there's a $56 million markup on a property during a time when the market was crashing. So it's fascinating that after all this time, 6 years later, this story emerges yet again as a key story to focus on this week in the history of Jeffrey Epstein. I wrote about this in the latest Greatest Heist story that I put out on narrative.org, NARATIV.org. Check it out. It explains the context behind why it's so important to keep focusing on the money. The money is where the story is, and the financial crimes is where the story is as well. You're going to be tempted along the way to just talk about the incredible torture and the cruelty that was handed out to these young women who should never have been in that position. That is horrific in every way, but that is largely a known story. What is not a known story is the financial crimes, which are so vast and which involved the Epstein network and the Donald Trump network. And when I say network, I'm referring to the criminal network, maybe organized criminals. And a lot of the money that was pouring in to both Trump and Epstein over the years came from the Russians. And you could see it there in that purchase of that Maison Amity, which $56 million, when you're getting that kind of money from a Russian oligarch in a weird deal that doesn't make sense where the market is collapsing, but you're suddenly paying over the market price. Well, that's money laundering going into Trump's pocket. It's that very kind of money laundering that went into Trump's pocket and also went into Epstein's pocket. He was doing a different kind of money laundering. But all that money that was washing into America was in fact Russia's strategic plan to corrupt America from the inside out. It was how Russia was going to destroy America. Cut to 2025, and look where we are right now. America really not the same place as it used to be, with a Manchurian candidate that's beholden to Russian President Vladimir Putin. How did they get there? Well, they got there through these infection of the American capitalist system with their dirty money. Once inside, they were able to position their people in such a way that they've been able to collapse the economy a few times, crash the markets a few times. Each time there was a bailout. So that is how America lands up in this precarious position we're in right now. So I am doing this series because I really want people to focus on these financial crimes. But before we do that, there was this news about the move of Ghislaine Maxwell to this prison. Came as quite as a shock today, and it was just hours after the Jeffrey family had spoken to both CNN and MSNBC, expressing their concerns about the way the president had referred to their sister and asking quite bluntly, what did he know? What did President Trump know about the blackmail scheme, about the human trafficking scheme? Because even though he might have been aware that Epstein took Jeffrey in the year 2000, he didn't do anything about it. He kept saying his best friend was Epstein and they kept hanging out together. Why did he not, in fact, do something about a human trafficking ring if he was aware of it, if he is such a savior of children, as the GOP like to make us think he is, in response to that MAGA QAnon plot that's being thrown out there to deflect from what is the actual plot, which is that Trump and Epstein were, in fact, partners in the scheme. But let's listen to the family here as some select clips from these interviews, as they explain why they're so upset about what Donald Trump has said about their sister.
She wasn't stolen. She was preyed upon at his property, at President Trump's property. And I think it's very important that we don't treat it like stolen. Seems very impersonal. It feels very much like an object. And these survivors are not objects. Women are not objects. What goes through my mind is that it's time to protect survivors and it's time to protect the young women.
Indeed, that's a very shrewd observation. Of course, that language that Donald Trump chose to use in describing Virginia Giuffre as stolen, so weird, so out of place. And why did he not do anything about that? Why did he land up just ignoring this human trafficking
It would
ring?
unwind everything that my sister and all the survivors fought for. It would be a disgrace of justice. Picking abusers over survivors.
He's particularly referring there to the notion that there might be a pardon or clemency or something like that coming for Ghislaine Maxwell, and picking survivors, picking the actual perpetrators over survivors is what he's saying there is just such a reversal, an inversion of what we think of as justice in America, and just the most horrific set of circumstances for these poor women who have suffered so much over 2 decades. Here's more from the family.
I was just going to say that when are we going to start believing survivors? I think it's in our culture that we just immediately dismiss them. And I referenced this in a previous interview that we had given. But like, this isn't going to take, I mean, I said this about my sister. Is it going to take her to die for us to leave her?
I can speak for that. I think the word that comes to mind is that it would be an abomination. Our sister always told us that Maxwell was even worse than Epstein. We said it in the statement that she was a monster. But this is a woman.
A monster. That's how Virginia Giuffre described Ghislaine Maxwell, who today was moved to a minimal security camp as her present sentence is still being served. She's only served about 5 years of a 20 years of sentence. She needs to serve way more, of course. She needs to finish her sentence because that's what the judge said she needed to do. But here is this brazen administration ignoring the courts, ignoring the justice, sending their own personal lawyers who are now the deputy AG to cut a deal with a pedophile who ran an extraordinary human trafficking network for decades that didn't only rape young women and girls, but it also, in fact, contributed to the collapse of the American economy time and time again, and has left America in this precarious state that we're in right now, where our economy is under such difficult conditions with the debt that we have, so much of which was created by the theft of so much money by Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, who is now, of course, the president of the United States, shockingly enough. We've also given a new picture of Ghislaine Maxwell today. This is this one here. She looks fine. So if any claims that she's been suffering, she doesn't look like she's been suffering. She looks like she's fine. And interestingly enough, had her hair done and is ready to go. Now, the new facility, I'm told, in Texas doesn't even have fences around it. This is how we are treating someone who is the chief architect, the head of a pedophile ring that for many, many years not only compromised politics, but raped young women in an attempt to compromise those politics. It's just appalling that we are in this situation. So now we get back to episode 3 of The Secret Life of Jeffrey Epstein. It's called The Balance of Power. In this episode, we really focused on Leon Black. And I want you to really pay attention to the Leon Black part of the story that we get to in the beginning, because we talk about Drexel, this financial firm that Leon Black worked for, and it collapsed in spectacular form. This is before the SNL crisis, and that all itself has another big story attached to it. But I want you just to think about the story as one of those company collapses that Jeffrey Epstein was involved in, because Jeffrey Epstein collapsed many companies, many of which caused crashes in the economy and bailouts. And this is one of those examples of a company that crashed. Jeffrey Epstein had some peripheral involvement in that crash. Millions of dollars disappeared, millions. They all ended up going to this guy, Leon Black, who started Apollo. And Apollo became a very successful company, particularly because of its relationship with the Russian Development Fund, the RDIF, which is run by a relative of Vladimir Putin. Kirill Dmitriev runs it. And Apollo, Leon Black, and Steve Schwarzman of Blackstone all were on the same board of the RDIF when it was first created. And of course, Leon Black is close to Jeffrey Epstein. He gave him was close, gave him hundreds of millions of dollars for reasons that we can't really tell during his time when they were still friends. So this is that story. This is what we knew in 2019. Now, there's a lot of new evidence that came out, but for right now, let's go back to 2019 and let's check it out. This is the episode we call Balance of Power. I'll take your questions afterwards if you have any, and I look forward to hearing from you, because I am quite, as you are, quite interested in reliving some of these moments, because power has always been at the center of Jeffrey Epstein's life. His appetite for money seems insatiable. He seems to be about control, or certainly about power. He even likes to control his friends, very rich friends, and he does that through blackmail. Some people say the blackmail is more important to him than the sex with underage girls. That is the kind of person we're talking about, someone who's addicted to power and craves that control. And that's why he probably found his way into the world of espionage as an Israeli agent. Tracy, you saw this the other day on NBC.
I did.
It's awesome because it's Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein at a party in 92. So what a scene. Look at this.
Drink, laughs, music. Who's that right there?
Jeffrey Epstein shows up at the party, one of the few named guests that shows up there. Ghislaine is there too.
See her in a minute.
Trump looks like he's having a very good time for someone who doesn't drink. if you look behind, she's just in the background. Ghislaine is, of course, the person who introduced Epstein to a lot of the rich and famous people that he knows today.
We told you guys a lot about her dad, Robert Maxwell, and his history as a spy.
So these guys were the richest of the rich, and some would say they are still now, but they are part of a much bigger group of people, sort of what we'd like to call the billionaire men's club, from Wexner to Trump to Barack, Tom Barack over there. Black is the person we're talking about today, Leon Black in the light blue over there. Robert Kraft is a New England Patriots owner, but he's not coming up in today's show. Keep an eye on him because we've got ties that will blow you away coming up next week. And then Howard Lorber at the very top there, who's well known for being part of Douglas Elliman. And so Black and Lorber feature in part one of our story today, which takes us back to when Donald Trump took these guys on a trip
to Moscow in 1996.
It was a free trip paid for by the good people of Russia. It was a pretty nice, fancy trip. But it wasn't the first time Trump had gone to Moscow.
It was not. The first time he was there with his wife, Ivana, and that was 1987.
Look at these pictures. I love these photos. The hair, the dress she's wearing, the beautiful St. Petersburg Opera House, the gilded stairs and statues. Just a gorgeous scene. But there he is, and the newspaper headline says, Trump lands in Red Square. The Soviets want him to build 2 luxury hotels. This is when the KGB first took an interest in Donald Trump. Many people who look at these things say this is the way that the Russians would approach someone like Donald Trump to lure him in, to cultivate him as an agent for what was then the Soviet Union, but would later become Russia. And I've been told by Yuri Folshtinsky, who's the co-author of Alexander Litvinenko's book, that this is in fact what was going on. That the KGB, even as early as 1987, were beginning to survey the world around Donald Trump, trying to figure out exactly whether he could be the guy they needed to be an agent at high levels within the American business community. Significant moment, to say the least.
For me, it makes perfect sense because from everything I've read and researched, Trump's dad was also affiliated with the Russian mafia.
Brooklyn, where a lot of these guys came from, was at the time the center of the Russian mafia in America. And of course, they teamed up with the Genovese family, and you saw the buildup of what is today one of the most powerful mafia groups in the world, certainly in the United States. And the other things that also mattered to, I think, the Russians is that Ivana is
Exactly.
a Czechoslovakian native, or as it was known then as Czechoslovakia. That was part of the Soviet Union, Eastern European fold. They had a lot of influence over there. So it gave them some comfort that she was helpful in bringing Donald Trump over. Maybe she was an asset. Who knows? These days, seems like everybody's an asset.
So we're talking 1987 is when he made his first trip, but that wasn't it. 1996, he took his buddies in the Billionaire Men's Club over for another trip. This time, it was for business.
The 4 categories that espionage groups use to convert someone to be an agent for a foreign country. And it's an acronym. It stands for money, ideology, compromise, which is really compromise, as we know today. And ego and excitement is the 4th one, which I thought was surprising.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this when you first showed it to me, and I'm like, okay, if we take a look at both Trump and Epstein from this model perspective, Epstein, I would say clearly all 4 of those would fit for him. Trump, I'm having a hard time with only 3. I think only 3 fit him.
You don't think he has ideology?
I think his money and his ego are his ideology.
I think you're right. There's a great clip from when he was running the campaign and he was like, money, money, money. I love money. Just one of these clips where I was like, that just is exactly what he's about. There really is nothing else. So sure, if you're the Russians, you're looking at this guy and you're assessing him and you're saying, how can we turn him into an agent? And you would go for the easiest of those for money. They probably did ego and excitement with that trip with Ivana, but also money. Money is how you do it. So in 1996, he gets another trip. He must have done well in round 1 because you, sir, get to go again with your 3 buddies to Moscow for the 2nd time. Now, Donald Trump will tell you that there was no business dealings with Russia. He would also be lying. This video, recently discovered by the BBC, comes from Russian television in 1996. It shows Trump and 3 of his buddies at a meeting with very Soviet-era kind of bureaucrats.
There's just water and a couple sodas on the table. It's so unlike Trump.
Can you imagine Donald Trump walking into the room with 3 bottles of water and a Pepsi or a Diet Coke?
And this is what he does with words. He says, I have no business dealings. Because, in fact, in 1996, nothing came out of this. So he could say, I have no business dealings. He was there to do business dealings with
Absolutely.
Russians.
It's now confirmed that a Moscow city official says that he was there in order to consider working on the largest mall in all of Europe is now in Moscow, and it's the Okhotny Riyadh Mall for American businessmen in Moscow in 1996. Now it's a few years after the end of the Cold War. There's nothing wrong with looking for some business in Russia. Who are these people?
The person directly to Trump's left is a gentleman named Howard Lorber. One of the mysterious phone calls being investigated that Don Jr. made after the Trump Tower meeting was to this guy, Howard Lorber.
And they found out the numbers. He said, you see, it was just my friend, my family friend, Mr. Lorber. Mr. Lorber is of Russian descent too, but he's also clearly a friend of the Russians. There he is with Donald Trump in 1996.
Next to him is a guy, I can't
Edward
see his
Lebeau,
name.
sorry, my phone.
Yeah, I think he's a property developer, correct?
Yeah, not just a property developer, but I don't think he was as much of the story because he didn't stick around with the Russians. The other guy.
The guy next to him, Leon Black, we're going to tell you a lot about him tonight.
He looks like he had a very rough night, doesn't he?
The floor must be outstanding.
It must have been. They achieved their goals because none of them looked particularly happy that morning, but Leon maybe should have had less of whatever it was he was having the night before. This is David Giovannis. That's the guy in the inset who was at the time the official handler for the four businessmen from the United States. He later on pops up in Oleg Deripaska's world, the oligarch who's very much involved in Trump Russia. David Giovannis landed up working for him, but this is him as a much younger man in 1996. I'm terrible at this math, but we're talking 30 years ago. It's a long time. These guys have been together in the Russian fold.
And you would think they'd no longer be there unless it was somehow mutually beneficial.
And you go back to this idea that money is the way into bringing people into the fold. These are businessmen. They speak the language of money. You bring them into Russia, dine them, wine them, and give them business opportunities. The more business they do with you, the more compromised they are, and the more you can use them against your enemy. And in fact, that's what it appears to have happened with Trump and with others. There's a definite sense that there's so much control by the Russians over these business leaders through these years and years of developing business deals that they've been basically put in a position where they have to do what Russia does.
Our viewers are probably going, okay, so Black went to Russia with Trump, but what does that have to do with Epstein? We're going to get you there, so just hold on.
It gets to Epstein, it gets to Kushner. You have to stick around because it's really interesting. So here he is, Leon Black.
He is the founder and CEO of a company called Apollo Global Management. He is worth $6.6 billion, which to me sounds incredible. Until I read he's only number 252 on Forbes' richest list. How is that even possible?
You need several multi-billion dollars to get near the top of the Forbes list these days.
1997 is when currently they're reporting that Black met Epstein. And the reason that's being reported is because that year, the year after he got back from Moscow with Trump, he created this Leon Black Family Foundation, right, Seb?
Yeah.
Point Jeffrey Epstein as a trustee.
Yes, and kept him there for about 10 years.
Correct.
Then they fired him, but they kept him on the official books for another 5 years.
2012. Now,
They say it was a mistake.
Being reported, but we can tell you tonight that Epstein and Black actually go back way further, and that way further is to the 1980s.
This is a big piece of the story that has not been revealed by anybody. You're hearing it here for the first time, and we think it's incredibly significant in light of what we're about to tell you. In the 1980s, Leon Black worked with Michael Milken, the junk bond king of the time. If you remember that scandal, they were inflating prices using these bonds that were basically junk bonds. And it turned out to be a bit of a Ponzi scheme until the whole thing collapsed on its head. Epstein also apparently worked for Drexel. It seems he had a close relationship with Milken other than working with Drexel. So this is a very significant thing because Black lands up leaving Drexel after it goes bankrupt, and he heads off to start the Apollo Global Management Fund with two other buddies from Drexel. It's what you do when you've just got billions of dollars from a bankrupt company. And that's why it's so important. Now, I'm going to run you through some interesting facts here, but I have to show you this photo, Tracy. This photo I love because it says everything about Leon Black.
Is that a blue money tree next to him?
Well spotted. Everyone has blow-up money trees at their office. It's a very funny thing. There he is in the offices of Drexel. Drexel declares bankruptcy on February 13th, 1990. Thousands of people are out of work the next day. They called it the Valentine's Day Massacre because so many people were laid off. And Michael Milken landed up spending 2 years in jail. He's the CEO we were telling you about. And he's now reestablished himself by giving away lots of his money to various philanthropic causes, especially on the West Coast. So people sort of like him again. But truthfully, he's the junk bond king. He helped tank this major company for up to $1 billion. And he's also friends with Donald Trump, Tracy.
Didn't know this, but the night of the election, Milken and Trump were together watching the election results. It's a small world when you're a billionaire businessman involved in financial fraud.
Why not watch your election victory with a felon?
It just goes to show this circle of men and how this is all evolving.
It's absolutely revealing, this Drexel piece of information. Everyone who left Drexel landed up being very successful. You know their names because they're big names on Wall Street today. They all walked away with billions of dollars and they made billions more afterwards. And it's unbelievable that people like Black, who was the head of mergers and acquisitions at Drexel, never faced any penalties for it. He landed up going to found Apollo using the money he probably took from Drexel with Joshua Harris and Mark Rowan. And today it's worth that giant number we gave you earlier.
Well, Rudy was the one prosecuting the Drexel case back then. Yeah, and there was a lot going back and forth with possible pleas, and it ended up that everybody got away with everything except for this one guy, Milken.
I shake my head every time I hear about Rudy Giuliani, who turned out to be a giant fraud. Here he is, probably letting these guys off the hook. There were two SEC chairmen, or former SEC chairmen, on the board of Drexel. They got away with it too. Giuliani today is calling for a pardon for Milken.
Yes,
and that to me is the most stunning piece of information. The guy prosecuting Milken from the 90s is today asking the president for a pardon. You got to say that there's some sort of connection there. It's hard to imagine that there isn't. I want to play you a little clip from the hearings that happened on Capitol Hill directly after Drexel went down. This is the SEC chairman at the time, Richard Breeden. He was asked about the amount of money that went missing from Drexel. The senator said, is it $300 million or so that went missing? Just listen to his response.
Actually, the number was larger than 300 million, probably in the 400 million that was ultimately moved out of the broker-dealer.
Where did it go, Leon Black? Where did it go, Jeffrey Epstein? Where did it go, Mr. Milken? It's hard to make $400 million disappear just like that in a month when you're under investigation by the U.S. attorney, and yet somehow they managed to do it. And there's another chink in the army. You know, we're cracking away at Leon Black's story about Epstein and Epstein's story about Leon Black.
He said, I was completely unaware of and am deeply troubled by the conduct that is now the subject of the federal criminal charges brought against Mr. Epstein. And the good thing about this being our show, Zev, I can say it like it is. That's a lie.
It really appears to be. So this was issued last week. There's lots of questions being asked about the relationship between Epstein and Black and Epstein and Apollo. And this is the statement that Black issued. Of course, we know, and because we're people who Google things, we can tell you that Epstein was part of the Black Family Foundation until 2012. There's also a Rothschild meeting with the Rothschild family.
A member of the founder of the Apollo Group met with the Rothschild family at Epstein's mansion to discuss tax issues and how they could work more closely together.
That's 2011 after Epstein went to jail. It seems impossible to us to believe that Mr. Black did not know that Epstein had served time in jail, having conducted this business afterwards. In 2009, Alexander Wolf, the writer for Daily Beast, saw Wilbur Ross and Leon Black hobnobbing with Epstein at a Southampton movie screening.
he not know 2 months after he got out of jail?
Where have you been over the last year, Jeffrey? We've missed you.
He could stay at home because he basically was at home for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Then in 2011, Epstein is on a board with two of Black's sons. The company's called Environmental Solutions Worldwide. Epstein owns a big piece of that 2 years after he's out of jail. Finally, there's a 2015 charity donation from Black's charity to Epstein's foundation called Gratitude America, of all things, in 2015.
Sure.
It's hard to believe when there's 5 or 6 instances where you've clearly been involved with Epstein after he was in jail that you did not know that he had been to jail. Everyone else in the world knew he had been to jail.
The institutional investors of Apollo Global, they want some serious questions answered about the relationship between Black and Epstein and Apollo Global. Frankly, they deserve the answers.
They do deserve the answers. These are big institutional investors, $1 billion each. We'll see if they get the answers that they're looking for in this coming week. Keep an eye out on Leon Black. Keep an eye out on Apollo. I think there's news coming this week on those guys.
They need answers on all of it.
Because in 2011, Putin starts something called the RDIF, the Russian Direct Investment Fund. It was a $10 billion fund designed to lure foreign businessmen and foreign money from places like North America to invest in Russia. And it's until recently, in fact, currently is headed by Kirill Dmitriev, who many of you might recognize from the Mueller report.
He was a key conduit to Putin in talks with the Trump administration. He was the one in, and you know how I like to call it, just one beer.
Seychelles.
Right.
So Eric Prince was there, and Eric Prince is like, I just had one beer with that guy, Kirill Dmitriev. And the Mueller report comes out, and it's like they had several meetings discussing the distribution of countries around the world in a new world order. Just one beer.
There were many businessmen that went in 2012 to meet with Putin over this investment fund. I mean, is it Lloyd Blankfein? Blankfein of Goldman Sachs and Steve Schwarzman. He wasn't the only one.
No, he wasn't the only one, but he was the only one that we found seated 3 seats away from Vladimir Putin in this photograph. There's Leon Black on the left. Putin looks like he's giving him the side eye. You don't get this kind of proximity to Vladimir Putin unless he's pretty sure of your loyalty. And it's no surprise as well that Black sat on the advisory board of the Russian Direct Investment Fund up until recently.
When they were imposing sanctions on Russia and it was becoming widely known that Russia had interfered in the election, many of the other members of the board stepped away and were just kind of let it out. But from what I understand, Black stayed on longer.
He was the last holdout of all the American business people on the advisory board. And it's clear as you look at this long-term relationship that Black has had with Russia since 1996. The money that came out of the RDIF made Black a very rich man today, a richer man than he was. It made the customers of Apollo Black probably even richer too. But at the end of the day, it came with strings attached. And that's probably why we landed up in the situation we're in today.
Keep in mind, we're talking here about how intelligence, spies, and money are all intersecting.
It's a really good point. You know, we have to keep in mind this idea that the Russians want these influential people in the United States to be on their side. They bring them in, they lure them in with big multi-billion-dollar deals that are so appealing to these guys who love money because it increases their bottom line. But once they're hooked, they can ask them to do things, they can ask them to influence processes that they otherwise might not do. And maybe the money's so good that they actually land up wanting to do it because the money's so good. In each of these cases, you can see how they slowly built their influence until something compromising catches the agent in a bind that could be revealed and hurt their career. Let's do it. Should we do this quickly? Like a little, how did we get here?
Yeah, we're calling it Meet Mr. Black. He is just a central figure, and I think you're going to see his name coming up in the news a lot more. In the 80s, he worked for the Jug Bank at Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert. When that went bankrupt in 1990, he founded his own company, Apollo Global Management.
In 1996, he takes a trip to Moscow with his friend Donald Trump. In 97, his family foundation is launched, and he hires Jeffrey Epstein to sit on the board. In 2011, Apollo goes public, and in 2012, he meets Putin in St. Petersburg.
In 2015, Black made a donation to Epstein's charity.
And here's where the plot thickens. Take a look at who we're going to go to now.
Jared Kushner, please. For
Jared.
500, Alex.
You've got it. It's Jared Kushner. Here he comes.
So we got 3 pictures there. I know Jared Kushner and I know Leon Black, but tell everybody who that other picture is.
Well, the other picture is that co-founder of the Apollo company.
Is it Joshua Harris?
Joshua Harris is correct.
Joshua Harris is very important because Jared Kushner appointed Mr. Harris as an advisor on infrastructure. And he was meeting with Kushner several times in the White House over infrastructure.
So how's that infrastructure week going anyhow?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I can tell you a few months later, it went really well for Jared Kushner. You know why?
Why?
Because Apollo, Harris's company, ended up giving Kushner's real estate company a little chunk of change. Guess how much?
I believe $185 million is the number you're looking for.
Yeah, $184 million.
I find it astonishing, depressing, or whatever adjective you want to use here, that a guy whose family is in debt, $1 billion, like already so deep in the hawk that you're like, he's never going to get out of it, is able to get to somebody who's willing to loan him any money. And so it's particularly astonishing and revealing that it's a guy with deep ties to Russia that loans Kushner $185 million when nobody else would touch that kind of person with that kind of debt. That person was Leon Black's company through Joshua Harris and the so-called advisor for Infrastructure Week.
All right, so a little bit of backstory for you guys. About 2 years ago when I started all of these investigations with Zev, I'd gotten a tip about a company named Artsy and to look into them. And I did. And I came across this picture from the U.S. Open with all these people gathered with
Look at
Jared
these
and
people.
Ivanka. So when we were doing our research on Leon Black and I found the picture of Leon Black next to Jared Kushner, that's the one on the left, I thought to myself, wait a minute, I've seen this before. These aren't the only 2 people that were at that U.S. Open. And we went back and looked, and what we found was just craziness, though.
This sort of group selfie they have here is quite revealing. I'm going to try to remember everyone's name. So Carly Close, I think on the very right there, she's the model who's dating Jared Kushner's brother, Joshua, who's the head of some big venture capital firm. Next to him, who's that next to Carly?
That is Dasha Zukova, who in 2016 was still married to the Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich.
You said it absolutely correct. Abramovich, of course, one of the richest men in the world, has
Yes.
been kicked out of the UK because he's involved in so much funny business. And he and Dasha divorced in 2017, so they were still married here. And
He got a lot of chunk of change
yes.
in that divorce as well.
Dasha gets around, and she certainly knows how to influence the scene over there.
If you go in the back row, I think that's David Geffen, and we've got the Kushners. But if you go in the back row and you see Leon Black,
There he's smiling.
it's kind of important who he's sitting next to.
Wendy Dang, who
Yes,
many of
sir.
you will know as Vladimir Putin's sometimes lover, but most of you will know as Rupert Murdoch's former wife. And she has been accused, it's been suggested at least by people in the know, that she
Yeah,
might be a risk.
In 2017, which would have been after the election and well after this picture was taken, this was September 2016, that all of these people, the wife of Russian oligarch, the Kushners, Wendy Dang, U.S. counterintelligence officials had warned Jared and Ivanka about Wendy Dang in 2017. They said that she might be using her friendship to benefit Chinese government interests. When you think about all these people in the same place at the same time, 2 months before the election, it's mind-blowing.
Black's company then gives the Kushners a $185 million loan. It's more than mind-blowing. It's downright suspicious. Those pictures of them having a good time at the tennis, maybe they didn't anticipate the lashback after the elections, but it's clear that they were coming out and ready for a party. They were going to tell the world that they had arrived, the set of really wealthy Chinese, Russian, American oligarchs. And the story didn't quite work out that way, but it's still in place, so we don't know how it's going to end. In 2004, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein are competing for a house in Palm Beach that landed up being the subject of a part of Mueller's investigation, financial compromise. The way the Russians work, they'll bring you in, they'll entice you with money, legal deals. And then a few years later, they do another deal with you, and then maybe another deal. And then that deal is a little bit crooked. That deal involves something that you will be embarrassed by in the future if the truth is revealed. And this particular deal in Palm Beach, this was one of the compromise deals. Tracy, why don't you tell
In
why?
2004, everybody speculated that Trump and Epstein stopped talking because of the young girl that had worked at Mar-a-Lago that got caught up in Epstein's crimes. But I'm going to ask you if it may have had more to do with this argument and fight over this mansion. In fact, Epstein showed Trump the mansion because he was looking to bid on it. When Trump went behind his back and bid $5 million more, so Trump won the bid for